And welcome everyone to Bracket U, a bracket podcast show brought to you by Delphi Bracketology. I'm the host, Brian Tonson. I'm here with my good partner, the media director of Delphi Bracketology, Steve Painter, and we're going to talk about our latest adjustments on the bracket. Delphi Bracketology, we've been doing this now for 12 years, I believe. And so you can find our work at delphibracketology.com. You can also find us on the X. The tagline is at Delphi Brackets, where you can see what we do, or you can interact with us and let us know. So tonight, as we do every week, we get together with our students. Steve and I go to games, and we sit and talk about decisions that the committee might have to make, and we will share with you some of those today. Steve, how are you doing tonight, and how you feel about we're wrapping up the season here real quick, but it's kind of fun at this point to talk some basketball.
Yeah, I'm doing well, and yeah, it's crazy how fast things have moved. And I mean, we're almost at March, so this is definitely our best time of year.
So, Steve, we're going to just start off in a general conversation. We're talking behind the scenes here. That something came out today that this new wins above bubble has been really important last year, and it's important again this year. That tool was emphasized that helps you get in to the tournament, and then maybe for your seed line is the metrics like the net and KenPom and Bart Torvik. Your thoughts on that, and generally as a math teacher, the use of metrics in deciding which are the best teams. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, the wins against bubble, the new metric, I guess we kind of call it the WOB. Yeah, it was interesting looking last year at that metric versus the teams that did get in, and it wasn't like line for line, but there was definitely a correlation going on between the teams that were in that ranking for the WOB and the ones that got in. It was close, and it wasn't, like I said, not exact, but it definitely saw some connection there. So I think it's a really important tool, especially for just picking the teams that are going to make it in. Maybe not so much of a sorting tool, on seeding and the higher seeds, but when you're talking about, deciding those bubble teams, I think it is probably a pretty good metric to look at.
Last year, everyone in the top 40 of this wins above bubble, the WOB, was in the top 10 seed lines, which is the top 40 teams. And in order to get in, you had to be in the top 50. The teams that were in Dayton had WOB factors in that range. So that's something to look for. You can find it on the team sheets. We do that on warrennolan.com. BartTorvik.com also has a nice spreadsheet to look at those numbers so you can view your numbers. But you want your team, if you're on here listening and want to know about your team, you want them in the top 50 at least for consideration, and then you want some good metrics like the net and KenPom do help. It still comes down, Steve, to wins, right? You gotta have some quad 1 wins and quad 2 wins. So my next question is, we're having difficulty with St. Mary's, and my first question to you is St. Mary's. Why would we have them in, and why would we also consider that they might be in jeopardy of not making the tournament?
Yeah, it seems like St. Mary's is one of those teams that this is not the first time this has happened. They're a good team, but they just don't have that many opportunities for the quad 1. They play Gonzaga, and then there's not a whole lot after that. Right now they're 0-1 in quad 1, but yet they're 23-4 overall. So they got a decent strength of schedule, good road record, but it's just that those quad 1 wins just aren't there. So I'd say, all the metrics are there except for maybe the most important one, which is, quad 1 wins. I don't know. Has the team ever made the tournament without a single quad 1 win? I'm not sure that's ever happened.
We keep a history of our spreadsheet. I'd have to go back to answer that question. I think that's a really good question. I know some teams in some other areas like just over 500, 3 games or 4 games over 500. There's been some teams with 14 and 15 losses that have made it. I know the situation I talk a lot about is Indiana State a couple years ago had the net of 29, but they only had 2 quad 1 wins, and they didn't have any wins against the field, and they got left out because there were some bid thieves in the conference tournament, or they might have gotten in, but St. Mary's has 2 games down the stretch. I believe they play Santa Clara and Gonzaga. And then they have the tournament where they'll likely play one of those again. I think the metrics are good. The WAB will get them in. The 27 gets them up around the 8 or 9 seed line. But for me, if you don't have a quad 1 win, I don't think if I were on the committee, I would put them in. That's just my thought. And we have a lot of those on the bubble, Steve, with 1 win in quad 1 or 2 or 0 quad. Ohio State is in the same situation. Good metrics, but no quad 1 wins. Would you be a hard no if you were in the committee room and someone had played well against their schedule, but really didn't beat anybody of note, that maybe from a smaller conference and didn't have the opportunities? Would you vote for them to be in at the back end, or would that be a hard no for you?
It'd be a strong no. I think you'd have to look at what they did with their opportunities too. Like looking at St. Mary's versus Ohio State. St. Mary's, they've only had 3 quad 1 games. They haven't won any yet, and so they're still in it. But then you look at Ohio State; they've had 8 opportunities. They're 0 for 8 in the quad 1. So that's one that you would. If I'm looking at those 2, maybe those are my bubble teams. I'm like, well, I'm not going to put the 0-8 team in, and then Ohio State probably will need definitely more than one win coming up to get in. But yeah, I think you got to look at what they're doing, what a team does with their opportunities.
Okay, Steve. So let's one. You're listening to Delphi Bracketology's Bracket U. We're talking about our spreadsheet and our seed list. We'll put out a bracket where the matchups are tomorrow at some point. Steve and I will both be in Mackey Arena watching Indiana and Purdue. We'll make some final touches there, but at some time before that tips off, you probably should have a bracket. You'll have a seed list probably earlier in the day. We meet with our group of students around 10 or 11. So we'll fire that out. But, Steve, our number 1 seeds, I think, are pretty clear-cut until you get to the last one. So our number 1 seeds right now are Michigan, which we watched this week, Duke, Arizona. And then the question becomes Iowa State, Houston, or Connecticut. We currently have Iowa State, but I think it's up for debate. What do you think, and which team do you like best for that 4th seed line?
I personally like Iowa State. We don't necessarily always look at head-to-head, but they did just play each other in an awesome game, and Iowa State, came out on top. But then above that, their net is 6 and 7. They're really close to each other. Quad 1 wins, 6 and 3 versus 7 and 3. So I mean, they're pretty close. So I would probably just give the nod to Iowa State. They're just one better on the net, and they just played each other. So I'd go Iowa State myself. But Houston's definitely a dangerous team, and I mean, they're capable of going right back to the championship.
I think if you wanted to go Houston, I'm a Iowa State right now as well. If you wanted to go Houston, it's probably because you could say on the team sheet Iowa State's losses, even though they were quad 1 losses, might be a little bit less. I just don't know that committee members focus on the quality of losses too much unless it's maybe a decision to put a team in or put a team out. So I am with you. If you win head-to-head and everything else is very, very close, which Iowa State and Houston is, I think the nod goes to Iowa State. I think the media people that are doing a mock selection, along with the committee, there's a couple mock selections coming out for people to see what is going on. I would trust, I'd trust them both. They do a good job, but the committee one on Saturday at 12:30 is the one you want to look at to try to see how they're judging things. The media one had Houston, so I think right now that last 1 seed is either going to be Iowa State or Houston. Connecticut losing at home last night to Creighton. Or the other night to Creighton, drops them down to the 2 seed line. So we have Houston, Connecticut, Illinois, and Florida. And we had a discussion, Steve, today about your Purdue Boilermakers. Are they a 2 or are they a 3? I think it's very, very close. You can make the argument for either one of those 2 teams, Florida or Purdue. Where do you see that discussion?
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkably close. They're just very similar on their resumes. I mean, they're 8 and 9 in the net. They both they're both 8 and 5 in quad 1. only have 2 road losses. They're big conferences, good competition. So normally after Purdue won those 2 big games, at Nebraska and at Iowa, I was just thinking personally, I'm like, oh, they're definitely back to a 2 seed, and they were until they lost to Michigan, which is not a bad loss, but yeah, you look at, they're just neck and neck with Florida. I guess if I'm just looking from a non-biased standpoint, just at the numbers, I'd probably have to say Florida just by a tad, but they're super close.
Yeah, we did decide Florida, and we were going to decide. That's a discussion we're going to have again tomorrow, and really dive deep in between these 2 teams on this cut line of the 2 seed line. If you argued Florida does have a quad 2 loss that Purdue doesn't have. Purdue has 2 more road wins. If you are in the committee room and it comes down to a vote and you have to campaign a little bit, I think that would be your argument for Purdue in that case. Our 3 seeds are Purdue, Kansas, Gonzaga, and Nebraska. Gonzaga is probably the team that could be a 3 or a 4, again, scheduling, and they have a quad 3 loss. Do you think that quad 3 loss hurts at this level? I don't know that it hurts back at 8 or 9 because a lot of people have similar losses, but when you have a lot of teams that don't have a loss outside of quad 1 in the top 4 seeds, do you think that loss should be considered enough, and maybe Gonzaga should be a little bit lower?
I actually think it does. Just again, I'm looking at your opportunities. Gonzaga doesn't play the greatest number of quad 1 teams, and their schedule's a little bit easier. So they're kind of expected to take care of business when they play these lower level teams. And yeah, having that quad 3, when everybody else around them doesn't have any quad 3 losses, I think I think it definitely should be a factor. Yeah.
So, Steve, remind me tomorrow when we meet with the students to really look at Gonzaga, Nebraska, Michigan State, because it would be Michigan State moving up to the 3 seed line. They have a quad 2 loss, 6 wins, just like Gonzaga does. So I think of those 3 teams, Gonzaga, Nebraska, and Michigan State, 2 of them will be on our 3 seed line going into that mock selection Saturday, and 1 will drop to the 4, and it could very well be a 26-2 Gonzaga team. So right now we have Michigan State, Virginia, Alabama, and Arkansas. I think there's a couple teams, Steve, that we could put in there, Vanderbilt and Texas Tech, which we're going to talk about quickly next with some injury concerns. Alabama and Arkansas played a monster game last night, double overtime. We had walk-ons playing, fouled out people, 110 points or whatever. What do you think of our 4 seed line?
Yeah, it's a good looking line. I mean, all those teams are it's normally, I think the level of those teams, you not normally used to seeing them at a 4. They were talking more on a 2 or 3. But yeah, I like where they're at, and I definitely, again, don't necessarily go head to head, but that game was just amazing. The Alabama, Arkansas, and Alabama beat them, and then just looking at their numbers, I mean, they're 2 teams that are just, again, super close on almost every metric, and so yeah, I would put Alabama right above them. Of course, that puts them both on the 4 seed line, but. Yeah, and then Michigan State too is another team that I think is capable. They could move up. They just have to take advantage of they're definitely going to get more big games coming up, and they've lost a couple, but they're going to need to get some wins in there, and then they might even move up to the 3.
We believe that our 5 and 6 line is pretty steady, and some of our teams on the 7 line, and that they may move a little bit. We have some concerns that I'm going to ask Steve about a little bit, and then when you get to the even the 8 seed line, St. Louis, Iowa, Clemson, SMU. Clemson's lost 3 in a row, but I think they're in pretty good position as long as the losing doesn't continue. And then when you get to what our rank 33 through 46. Which is our 9 through 11 seed line, you could probably throw a dart at every team and move them up and down and still make an argument that team belongs at 33 and another team down at 44. They're razor thin. But before we get to our bubble out, let's talk a little bit about injuries that we all, as bracketologists, have to pay attention to, and fans need to know how the committee will look at. Texas Tech lost their best player in Toppin, who is out for the season. North Carolina, Caleb Wilson is out with a broken hand, may or may not return. And what the committee does they will give credit for these teams for what they've done, but they will look at the new roster, if you will, and how they do. Right now, North Carolina is 1-1 without their best player and got blown out. They actually had a second player out, and so that's going to be monitored. How tough is it, Steve? Just share with our viewers and our listeners, how tough is it when you see we're data-driven and number-driven, and then you got these other factors that you have to pay attention to, so they really become multiple teams based on their injuries.
Yeah, it seems unfair, but we've seen it before. You think of Robbie Hummel when Purdue was just cruising and going to be a 1 seed, and they lose their star player, and they got knocked down. But usually it actually ends up being the right decision because the team is not the same, and Purdue wasn't, and they lost early. And then we were talking about probably the biggest one ever was with Kenyon Martin for Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Was another one that, he goes down right before the tournament starts. And I think they bumped down maybe 2 seeds because of it. And, it doesn't seem fair, but I think it is the right thing to do because otherwise, their opponent would be, maybe their opponent's going to get, say you leave them in a 1 seed. They're getting the 1 seed, but it's kind of an easier 1 seed. It's not fair for the other teams that are having to play the 1 seed. So, I think they just have to go with what they honestly think that team is, and have to go with that. It does seem unfair though that you're all these great wins and everything that got you there is still there, but you get penalized. But I think logically, I think it just makes sense.
So watch for those teams to see how far we dropped them down 1 seed line just as a placeholder, kind of to keep an eye on. If they win now with the new rosters, we'll go back to looking at their record, and if Caleb Wilson comes back for the ACC tournament, we can make adjustments for that too, because that's what the committee will do. So now I'm going to throw in here up on the screen if you're watching live or if you're watching later on YouTube, our spreadsheet that we use, and it's got the quad 1 wins and all of that. But we use this spreadsheet and we look at it, and then we sort the data, sort the teams up and down as we move. But what you're looking at, or if you're watching or listening on a podcast, what we are now looking at is the bubble, and really right now it is 33. So that's 8 and 13 teams. We're looking for 13 spots that probably need to be decided in the next 3 weeks. And at the very bottom, as we're scrolling down, we have 8 teams, I think, with a chance, and possibly 11 teams that we're watching. So you have 24 teams, 13 spots. Steve, your thoughts on any particular team or the difficulty of the bubble or what we're kind of looking at here, how tight this kind of is in this area at this point?
Yeah, I think every year it's the toughest part of our job, and it's probably the most important part of our job because just the way the bracket matrix contest works, getting that team in is pretty important. If you miss that and someone else gets it right, it really puts you behind. So it's critical that we get the right teams in. But it's so hard because, like you said, there's an argument for. You look at the bubble, and pretty much every team is going to be stronger in one category, but weaker in another, and you can make the argument. When we have, I think Ohio State is our second team out, and we kind of talked on that earlier. Even though they play, great schedule, and then just on paper they look like a really good team. They don't have the quad 1 wins, and you look at everybody else in the bubble, except with the exception of. VCU doesn't have any quad 1 wins too. I think you got to look at those as one of the top criteria of getting them in. So maybe we're going to talk about this later, but a team we were talking about that is Miami of Ohio, which is unbelievable record, undefeated. But if they don't win that conference tournament, then now they're on the bubble, and they could very well sit out because they don't have any quad one wins. So that's going to be a really interesting one to watch during conference tournament weeks to see what Miami does, and then if they don't make it, what's going to happen to them. But because there's a whole slew of teams that are just as deserving to make it in and probably have better metrics.
Right now on the screen, you're seeing teams that are in that have 40s in this WOB that we talked about at the beginning of the show, and 40s of the net. So those two metrics would meet. New Mexico only has 2 quad 1 wins. Ohio State has 0. San Diego State only has 1. VCU 0. And then you get the next level of teams on our screen now are teams that have more quantity of wins, but both their WOB and their net is in the 50s or 60s, which I think is a damaging combination. That's Virginia Tech, California, West Virginia, and Oklahoma. So those are the teams out. We do believe a couple wins for New Mexico, Ohio State can bounce them in. When we go back to the top, we see, Indiana 41 in the WOB, 32 in the net. That's in a good spot. Georgia's 39 in both, good spots. St. Mary's 33 and 27. And then you get to the teams 41, above. You have TCU 49 in the WOB, 47 in the net. That's kind of out of selection area, but they have 4 quad 1 wins and some good wins. Missouri is 4-4 in quad 1 and 3-4 in quad 2, so their wins are there for Missouri, but they're 59 in the net. 38 WOB gets them in, so we're kind of balancing those two things with the toughest decision, Steve, right here is do you move the teams with wins up or do you move the teams with metrics? And that's got to be something that we have to discuss going forward. Where would you sit if you're on the committee and you're looking here at that, 2 distinctly different groups of teams, in my opinion, all the way up to 33 even, with Auburn in a tough situation but has wins. What would you value the most if you were a committee member on this bubble?
I think the quad 1 wins, and and I think just the actual overall net sometimes has. I think that's a big factor. Now, right now, all of our bubble teams are pretty close on the net, with the exception of Missouri. We've got Santa Clara's at a 40. St. Mary's is at 27. You get Missouri to 59. So that kind of discrepancy might be a factor. But I like the net, and I like quad 1 wins personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's, for me, TCU and Missouri have to be in, despite some of the quad 3 losses I'm looking at for TCU. TCU would be the one that I would probably drop if they lose a couple more games or some of their numbers go into the 50s. Santa Clara is tough. They had an opportunity and they lost it against Gonzaga. I think they play St. Mary's. If they don't defeat St. Mary's there in the tournament, I think you might see a Santa Clara move out. Steve, anything else you want to talk about? We've gone the top 4 seeds. We've gone the bubble. Anything else you want to talk about tonight?
Not really, other than I don't know if it's the right thing to talk about during the podcast here, but you look at UCLA. We were talking about them earlier today, and they're not playing that well. That they're approaching that bubble range, and then you see like little things like the way Mick Cronin has been acting towards media, towards his players. You wonder if something like, if it ever gets personal. I mean, these are human beings that are making the decision, and if you have someone like that that's just kind of looking like it's just kind of not great for basketball, does that have a factor?
Do you vote him? Do you vote him out? Yeah,
exactly. There might be guys that'd be like, I would just love to, kick him out. Who knows? If I was Cronin, I would definitely start being a little nicer to people, because he's and quit complaining, because he's on the verge of not making it.
And win some games. And then on the other side of your argument too is Do you think any of the committee members would be sentimental if an undefeated Miami gets beat in the MAC tournament at the semifinals or the finals? Like, their resume to me says no based on what we've done for 12 years. They don't have enough wins. They don't have the numbers necessarily. Maybe the wins against bubble, but their schedule is just very, very – their strength of schedule is very, very poor. I don't think they have the resume to get in, but sentimental, you wonder, like, we have to reward a team. But then the question comes, what if you have 8 small conference teams that run the table based on poor scheduling, right? So Miami of Ohio, I think USC has fallen for us because they've had like 3 teams in injuries. Baker Mazara is out now. Rodney Rice is out. Some of their wins in Quad 2 were with at the beginning of the year when they had their full complement of players, and then they get this Arenas kid. So we're watching USC very closely. We've moved them down. They got blown out by Illinois last evening. And just one result doesn't mean you're going to move up or down. But there are things, Steve, that I think are human side of this besides data. I think you're absolutely right. So as we head into our meeting tomorrow, and to let our listeners know, we change this all the time. We don't have to have our contest set until 5:45 right before Selection Sunday. So sometimes teams will move and they haven't played. It's just we've done a deeper dive, or a student will come into my room during homeroom and want to look at 2 teams, and then we send it out, or we ask other people. So if you see teams move up and down and you're like, they didn't play, it's because we're constantly trying to dive into all of the different stats. Let me end this tonight, Steve, with this final question tonight. Which team, besides your Purdue Boilermakers, and I can't answer Indiana either because those are our 2 squads, and Steve and I will not be fighting on Media Row tomorrow, even though we have 2 different interests. I can't thank Steve enough for the work that he's done for us, and he'll be back on the show here before we're done, I'm sure. But is there one team that you either think is too high, too low, or you like, or you want to discuss here before we call it an evening?
We were talking earlier. I was not that high on St. John's. We've got them right there in the let's see, right outside. Right, yeah. I guess we have moved them down. I think earlier today we had them in the 5th seed range, and I didn't think their numbers were there, just in comparison to all the others. We were just kind of doing a side-by-side look at all those teams around them: Tennessee, BYU, Louisville, UNC, and I had St. John's as at kind of ranked lowest, but we had moved them down, and that's a team I was not as high on. And then other than that, a team I was kind of liking was BYU. They've had a strong week, and I think their numbers.
They have an injury too, Steve. They lost the Saunders kid, the guard.
Yeah. Yes.
So there's another. We got 4 teams with major injuries, which is sad that these teams have to deal with that late. For me, it's the Big East: Connecticut, Villanova, St. John's. Again, you talked about St. John's, and continuing with the Big East after what you said. They don't have a lot of opportunities to get quad 1 wins, but they're good basketball teams, right? Does that factor in too? You've talked about opportunities twice tonight. Does St. John's and Villanova get a little boost because they just aren't able to do those things? And then do the metrics play a bigger part with teams from that type of conference? We'll have to see. But the other thing we'll talk about next week probably is the smaller conferences, St. Louis and Utah State, how difficult it is to place them up against bigger conference teams. So, Steve, thank you for taking time tonight. We will be back Monday with a guest from Iowa, a good friend who does now dabble in some bracketology. He's an honorary member of the bracketology, John Altina. I hope I pronounced that right, John. He'll be joining me, and then we'll have maybe Steve and some kids back again on Thursday. But we're going to try to go Monday and Thursday all the way up through tournament time to give you just a little bit of insight. Once again, our work is on DelphiBracketology.com. Seed list comes out quite a bit. Our bracket will be out tomorrow at some point, and then follow us on the X at Delphi Brackets. So for Steve Painter, I'm Brian Tonsoni. Happy hoops watching. Enjoy your weekend.